Hello and welcome back to the final English literature poetry lesson focusing on Remains by Simon Armitage. And today we bring together all of our knowledge to answer the question, how do I write an excellent analysis paragraph? So everything you've done previously, you are bringing all that knowledge together today and you are going to put it together into a paragraph, and that is going to be the piece of work that you submit to your teacher for an assessment. So we'll get straight into it. Make sure you've got all of your old notes, pad, paper, pen, poem, everything else. Let's begin. Straight to it today, an excellent paragraph. What does it contain? Well, look on the left. Point, evidence, and explanation. It's going to be familiar to each of you. A simple way of organizing a paragraph, and it works. But we're going to look at things in a little bit more detail today. So when we write our points out, we are going to make sure that it includes both an idea and identifies a method. I'll explain to you method very shortly, so don't worry about that now, but just understand that a point should be broken up into two parts. We explain our idea and we identify a method. Evidence, well, that's our quotation or a reference to part of the poem. If we were talking maybe about structure, then we would refer to it rather than quote it perhaps. And the explanation, which should always be the largest part of the answer, should have the effect of the quotation, which is basically what it shows, suggests and symbolizes. So you'll have several sentences of writing there. But you should also identify the terminology that you can identify in the quotation and link the context of the poem to your analysis as well. So the explanation is going to be the biggest part of your answer by a very large margin, containing as it does the effect, terminology, and the context. Now, I'll explain to you about method and terminology, what they mean and how they're different. Method is the larger of the two. A method is something that a poet uses to create an overall effect or a technique. So the form of the poem itself is a method. Dramatic monologue that Armitage chooses to write this poem in, he's choosing the method of dramatic monologue. The voice that the poet chooses to write the poem in is another method as well, because that affects the meaning of the poem on a really broad scale. The use of language is a method, so a poet can achieve an effect by using language. And the structure of the poem is also an effect, is also a method. So what you will notice is that these are all very large things that you can talk about the whole poem with, and the method is the big bit, and inside that, within it, fits the terminology. So terminology can refer to word types like nouns, verbs, adjectives, language techniques such as metaphor, simile, or poetic techniques such as enjambment or caesura. And what we will usually find is that terminology is what contributes to the method. So if the method is language, then I'm going to be able to find language techniques that the poets use that will support the fact that this method is being used. This will make sense to you more when you see it in action. So next I'm going to show you an example of a paragraph being put together with all of these features within them. Watch what I do and listen to me explain very carefully, because when you come to write your own paragraph, this will be the model that you follow. Now this is a busy page, so I'm going to explain it step by step, and hopefully you'll understand exactly where I'm coming from here. At the very top of my page, I've got the question that I'm answering, and this is the question that you will be answering too. How does Simon Armitage explore the experience of stress, trauma, and guilt that soldiers experience in war? All right, so it's quite a big question. I've got a number of things I can talk about there. I'm going to write my answer, and I'm going to follow these different steps. Start with my point, which is my idea, my method, my evidence, my explanation. Now, I begin, and please notice these are color-coded so you can see where each has gone. So if you pause this and use it as an example when you're writing your own answer, you'll be able to link these two together. Make your point by explaining your idea, which is usually whatever the question has asked you to prove. So let's have a little look. Simon Armitage shows the stress and pressure that soldiers have to deal with. Great idea, links directly to the question where we've got stress. And then say what method the writers used to create their point. Okay then, through the use of language and the voice of the poem. So I've actually managed to pick out 2 methods there, but nothing fancy or too long. I've just identified it and I'm going to move on to the interesting bits. And it's time for my quotation, my evidence that actually proves that this is what he's doing. In the opening line, on another occasion. All right, 2 sentences, no, in fact 1 sentence in, 3 lines, and I've already gone down to this stage. I've done idea, method, quotation. It's time for the explanation. So I'm looking at effect, I'm looking at terminology, I'm looking at context, and effect is in black. So just take a moment to look how much I write about the effect. Shows, suggests, symbolize. This is important. Your answer should look like my answer in terms of how much effect you write about. So all of this is in black. In purple, you'll see where I've used terminology by just fitting it into my answer. And in red, you will see how I fitted context in. Let's have a quick read through it. This line shows that it was common to go out on patrols, and this was, as far as he knew, just another day. Those of you paying attention will notice that I've basically taken the notes that I made when I was analysing quotes last video, and I've turned them into a paragraph. That's what your notes are for. So if you did last video's activity where you picked 2 quotations and you made notes, you're really well set up to answer this question today. The phrase another occasion suggests, so phrase is a piece of terminology, it's a technical English term for a short couple of words together. Another occasion suggests that the soldiers were used to being under threat and dealing with possible violence regularly, while the casual tone, that's another English technical term, might tell us that they accepted the risk or maybe had become numb to it. So I'm using my might and maybe and perhaps words to allow me to say several things at once. The line also suggests that danger was everywhere because they often had occasions where they were out in Basra dealing with threats. Perhaps it also tells us that the soldiers patrolling Basra during the Gulf War, that's some context fitted really nicely and neatly in there. So the person reading this answer knows that I know when this poem is set and what this poem was about. We're being overworked and shouldn't have been out so often. This can symbolize, so symbolize I've thrown in its own section at the end because I wanted to make sure it stood out and I had a few things to say about it. The experience of the soldiers having to deal with constant stress and danger, and the fact that the army wasn't looking after them by giving them time to rest and recover might have led to, and here's my context again showing I understand what the poem was about and what influenced Armitage when he wrote it, Guardsman Troman's eventual breakdown. And that is my paragraph, that is my example. So again, this is what you will be producing. Different quotes, of course, your own ideas, but this kind of length, these kind of proportions, the most written about effect, nicely included context, all of these things. So here is your assessed task to hand in. How does Simon Armitage explore the experiences of stress, trauma, and guilt that soldiers experience in war? And you're going to answer that in one full paragraph. Now, please follow these 5 steps because I promise you it is the best way to make sure you do quality work. And as you're handing this into your teacher, this is the piece of work that you want to really stand out. Think before you do anything. Really think through this. Maybe reread the poem. Then plan what you're going to say. Bullet point it. Be ready. Finally, write it out. And when it's written out, check what you've written. Don't just assume that it's fine. Double check it. Don't make silly mistakes. Finally, submit it to your teacher. Make sure it's been submitted. And then you're done. You've analysed your first poem and your first piece of English literature work has been sorted out. So put your feet up for a moment, relax, feel proud of yourself, and then wait for the feedback from your teacher. This class should take you 20 minutes. Set yourself a timer, make it happen. Have a great day, and thank you very much.